What's up and welcome to another episode of the Scott and Ian Show on the SBL podcast. Today, the confusing world of strings. Oh my God. I don't know about you, but for me, when I started to play the bass, I didn't even know that you needed to change your strings. And then someone's like, oh yeah, you got to change your strings every 2 weeks. And then someone's like, oh no, I never change my strings. And then someone's like, oh yeah, there's ones that are black and like they're like tape wound. And other people are like, no, flat wound. Like what's on an upright? And other people are like, are you insane? Rotosound and John Entwistle invented the round wound in the late 60s for a reason, to sound big and bright. And oh my God, where do you begin? There's different brands, different gauges. Some people freeze them. Remember blue steels in the 90s? You can boil them. It goes on and on. We're here to talk about it. We're here to talk about the things that we love about it, our favorite things, give you some recommends. So if you're confused about strings, hopefully after this, you'll be a little less confused. Hey, what's going on at SBL? October 30th, that's Monday. We've got yours truly in the hot seat, mentors, A to Z of the greatest bass lines ever. I'm recording this before then, obviously, so I haven't even picked my artists that start with N. Should it be Nirvana, Nine Inch Nails? I can't even think of another good one. No effects. Nina Simone. Who knows? You're going to have to show up and check it out. So much fun. Hey, we do Mondays, mentor days at SBL, where a mentor, a different tutor, is in the chair teaching live. You get to come, you get to ask questions, interact. It's awesome. I love being a part of that. I look forward to it every time. And then the following Monday, November 6th, Todd Johnson is in the house doing the Days of Wine and Roses, a melodic and rhythmic sequence breakdown of that classic. So check that out. Also, starting November 6th, challenge yourself to practice without a bass. That's in the community, on the campus. We've got campus challenges going on at SBL. That's starting November 6th. Challenge yourself to practice without a bass. Check out what that means over at scottsbasslessons.com. If you haven't taken the free 14-day trial yet, do it up. It's easy to do. Go to I never need to say that again, scottsbasslessons.com to grab a free 14-day trial. Check it out. Hey, enough of me. Let's get into this episode all about strings.
We're talking about strings before we've even talked about strings. I was literally, you were talking, I was like, oh yeah. I was like, I'll press record after this conversation. Then I was like, oh shit, this conversation is about strings. We better press record now.
Oh, and we promised the people, man. We promised the people.
Yeah,
right?
We did promise the people. Yeah, we're going to be talking about strings. We said the next one's about strings. It's about strings, dudes. And,
strings.
Should we jump into... So Ian and I were we'll give you the backstory. So an episode or a few episodes ago, we were geeking out about jazz basses that... Well, first of all, we were saying that all jazz basses aren't equal. And they, even though they look the same, and people say, oh, it's a jazz bass versus P-bass thing... It's actually a little bit more complex than that, because a lot of jazz basses, well, they sound completely different. Some sound like they've been stuck in a grease pot, which is what I really like. I love a jazz bass when it sounds like old and vintage, and then some sound really crisp, and it's more than just the woods. And we were discussing that in the past episode. And Ian said, oh, you've got to check out this Michelle Endiancello. How do you pronounce it? Is it Endiancello?
Endeggiocello.
So you've got to check out this clip when she's doing a Berkeley clinic. And he said, like, it's either flat wounds on this jazz bass, or it's like they're the deadest round wounds of all time. So we listened, we finished the pod, and then we were listening to the clip, and we're like, they're definitely flats. They're definitely flats. And then I was talking to Ian about, well, is it low tension flats, or like, what's the vibe? And actually, and I was pointing at my Alinto over there in the corner, my P-bass. Shout out to Mitch and Eric over at Alinto. That's got really low tension flats on it, and I actually think I prefer, because I was just playing this 59p over at Andy's place a few weeks back. That's got chromes, which are definitely higher tension than the labella like the low tension labellas. And I actually think I prefer the higher tension. And you were saying that they've actually developed a flat wound over at labella that is a higher tension, right?
Yeah, it's like a thick gauge, but not as, it's like I think the E string is like 107 or something. And I'm actually turned off by high gauge. I don't love like big gauge strings, but these are a really interesting string that Mitch developed, that Mitch and Eric, over at Olinto put together. And they're like a thicker gauge, but they're not as thick of a tension as you would think. So I would call them, I wouldn't say they're low tension, but I'd say they're medium. I think they're a heavy gauge, but a medium tension. And they're beautiful. I think if you don't love the low tension flats, or like if you've ever played Tomastic Infeld, like TI flats,
got it.
They're very low tension. You might really love those new Olinto labellas are so cool. And it leads me to make this statement: flats. If we're talking strings, which we are, ladies and gentlemen, baby. We are. Flats have so much more variation between brands, materials, tension, gauge, the core, how they're wrapped, what the core material is, the core shape. And yes, round wounds have difference too, and there's a zillion choices for both. But flat wound bass strings, and when I say that, I mean the string that Scott and I had started out talking about, or if you feel an upright string, it's smooth to the touch, right? It's a core of wire wrapped in metal tape. That's essentially what a flat wound is. There's a core wire through the whole string, and then they're wrapped with tape. Whereas a round wound string is the thing that probably most of us are familiar with, where it's a core of wire, but it's wrapped also with wire. It's wrapped with just a thinner gauge of wire, and it creates that scrape, right? Like, if you have here, this bass has rounds. If you can take a pick or your fingernail and make this sound, that is a round wound string, right? And flats don't do that. Flats are smooth to the touch. They're wrapped with tape. I don't have one in arm's reach here, but I've discovered that I was like, I'll get some flats and it'll sound old school. When I started to get into flats, I was like, I'll get a set of flats. Who cares what they are? And it'll sound like James Jamerson. Not the case. Yeah, because they take time to break in, and the tension is different. And oh my God, there's so many. It's a crazy world, isn't it? It's such a crazy world, dude. Is your cable catching on something? I'm getting some booming. Boom. Is it? I'm booming? Hearing. I was hearing that too. I think it might have been. I think it might have been upstairs. Oh, there you go. Something's going on up there, but maybe I'll try to get the cable out of the way. Awesome. Yeah. But it's so different, isn't it? So if anybody's thinking about jumping into flat wounds, it is an interesting world. It's let's get there, but let's do rounds. In fact, let's just sort of start this off with saying, in the past episode, I did mention that even though I absolutely understand clearly that strings have a huge impact on your tone, and it's interesting when you watch forums or listen, read on forums, everybody's talking about pickups and they're talking about basses and different body woods and different fingerboard woods, and all of these things do make a difference to the sound. But Jesus, strings also make a huge difference. It's huge, yeah. And round wounds as well, like a huge, of course, huge. And it's something, and I openly stated this, even though I know this, I haven't experimented with a bunch of different strings. In fact, when somebody asks me, hey, what strings have you got on that bass? I'm always like, oh. And I have to think about I'm really terrible. And the embarrassing reason is that they're expensive and it takes a long time to change. In sort of if I objectively think about this, I should absolutely get 5 different string brands, and I should put them on a bass and and record what it sounds like, and then swap them all out. But I don't. Yeah, I know, because I'm just a bit lazy. But that's what I should do. I should do that. But who has time to do that? I mean, I don't know. I guess. In years past, I've done similar. I haven't done like a direct comparison like that, but I have experimented with a bunch of different strings, especially flats. And I will say this, I mean, just to push back a tiny bit, strings are, yes, they're expensive, but in the scheme of things, in the scheme of the things that you can buy to make a difference to your tone,
fair play,
they're cheaper than a bass, they're cheaper than a pedal or a preamp, right? And so, you know, or an amp, if you buy strings, it is John Mayer said this thing once. It said that the string, you don't actually play the guitar. You think you play the guitar? Oh, you're wrong. You actually play a string. Yes. And the guitar is just the
surrounding material.
Yeah. It's the thing that the string is attached to. But you don't play the guitar. You know, you're not touching the guitar and making sounds. You're playing the string. And then there's these pickups that pick up there's a magic, a freaking that I will never understand, no matter how many engineers explain it to me, the magnetism of the pickup and sends it through the wire. Like, are you kidding me? It's magic. Dude, it's magic.
It is. Yeah.
And you interface with this string that makes magic through the pickups and comes out but you're not actually playing the bass. You're not playing the guitar. You're playing the string.
It's so weird, isn't it?
Yes.
Have you done sort of like, in terms of roundwounds, have you done like a deep dive into different brands and what you really prefer?
Long ago, and I will give you my general impressions. Now I play pretty light. I'm not a big clanker. Like, I don't play an aggressive style unless I'm trying to emulate Geddy, emulate John Entwistle. But when I'm playing for me, I tend to play pretty light. And I don't love super bright, like stainless steel round-wound strings. And there are people that do, like Jacob Umansky from Intervals is a great example of, he plays steel strings on a dingwall and they sound bright and they're just nasty. And they also feel kind of grippy and gritty and teary on his fingers. And he likes that. I hate that. I'm the opposite. I
hate that as well.
I hate
that.
It.
Yeah. I'm Nichols all the way, because I hate that. I hate the feel of the steel. It feels weird, like when I move up and down, it's like, it's grippy.
Oh, it feels like it feels like, you know, when you touch a microfiber cloth and it kind of grabs all the little bits of skin on and you're like, it kind of sticks to your fingers. I hate that feeling.
But I know players that love it.
Yes, exactly.
They love steel strings, So weird,
But so you're nickel rounds all the way.
Nickel round, dude. I didn't even know there was but none of us did, right? Way back when, in the olden days, I used to pick up basses and I'd be like, how come this feels really uncomfortable and weird to play? And that one over there in the shop, that one feels fine. I didn't know for like an embarrassingly long amount of time that it was because steel, like over a year, like way over a year, maybe like even 2 years or something like that. And I was like playing like professionally. I was like, oh, this feels weird. And then I realized or found out, because obviously this was like before the internet. Well, that's my excuse anyway. That that's my story. But it was the steel strings. I hated the steel strings. Hated. And some of them have got like really sort of like really chunky winds on them, and
and they just grab your fingers, and I mean, but that's a thing to try. I mean, you might, if you're listening out there and you're like, ooh, I want something that feels grippy and is super bright and like, slap tone is like, I mean, just big and monster and bright. That's cool.
And they last for a longer time, don't they? Is that the deal? They last for longer, I think. I don't know.
God, I mean, I think that all just depends on how much you play and how much you sweat and how much skin cells come off of your fingers. And I will say that when I switched to nickels, I thought, oh, these are going to be so dark and weird. And they're not. Nickel rounds, like, for instance, the one that I play a lot now are Dunlop Dunlop Super Brights. And those strings are really bright. They're to me, I don't know if I were like A-B comparison and heard them back to back with steel and someone else was playing and I wasn't feeling them, I'm not sure that I'd be able to tell the difference. But so you get a really bright round wound string. They maybe die a little faster. I don't think that's a bad thing. I love actually the sound of
true. Yeah.
deadish rounds. But you get a smoother feel to the finger, I think. Is that right?
A smoother touch.
A smoother touch. Just a delicate massage of the fingers. I don't know what that was. I don't know who I'm trying to be.
Some call me a handmaiden.
Do strings last longer for you because of gloves?
Oh, hell yeah, dude. Yeah.
Incredible.
For sure. Because there's zero sweat coming off my hand. None. Zero.
But if you don't know, that is not the reason that Scott wears the gloves. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast. Yeah. But yeah, they definitely help. But yeah, I haven't. Interestingly, I was going to ask you what string brand you use, and you're like, oh, no, Dunlop Super Brights. I was like, oh, shit. That's what I use as well. And I bet we use them for the same freaking reason. Let me tell you a story.
Yeah, please.
Daryl over at Dunlop is awesome. And he's a really great networker. And he reached out to you and he was like, hey, Ian, can I send you a bunch of strings? And you're like, fuck yeah, Daryl, send me them strings. And now you use Dunlop Super Brights.
Oh, that is not
that
far from the truth.
Exactly.
I mean, before I was playing Dunlops, I was playing DR Sunbeams. Have you ever played Sunbeams?
Dude, so Dave from Aguilar, right? So Dave Avenius from Aguilar, he has started working for DR. And Dave,
really?
He sent me some strings. He was like, so him and Daryl, man, they're chatting. Like
Amazing.
Dave's seen what Daryl's doing. Yeah, so he sent me some strings and stuff like that. But I don't think I used the Sunbeams yet. I haven't done like a full deep dive, so I'm not really going to sort of like, say anything. Ooh, they were great. They were not great. Whatever. I need to do more. I need to try more of them out. But yeah, shout out to Dave at Aguilar. So Dave used to be the guy. Dave and Dave Boone, the two Daves, Dave and Dave Boonshaft over at Aguilar. They were freaking awesome.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
know dude. Can you remember like Aguilar back in the day when they started doing the Aguilar Loft? Can you remember like that was
of
like
course.
Game changing.
So cool. Yes.
Game changing. They had people going into their loft in New York City, and they were like doing these shows, and they were videoing it and put it on the internet, and like that was they were the first to do that. So I think that Aguilar actually freaking crushed it. So shout out to the two Daves. Yeah, obviously Aguilar then got sold to Korg, and they've got I think they've like obviously different leadership in place. I'm not sure where they're based out of anymore. Maybe they're based out of New York still. I'm not sure.
They're in New York. Yeah.
But
they're on Long Island.
Yeah, are they on Long Island? And then the two Daves, they stepped away. They're not involved anymore. I'm not sure what Dave Boonshaft's doing, but Dave, the other Dave, he's at DR Strings. And to your point, I haven't tried DR Sunbeams. I really want to, though.
Oh, try them.
What's the vibe?
Okay, so the other thing about a round wound string that I think makes a difference is the core. And the core can be a different thickness, but I think the shape makes the biggest difference. So there's hex core, where it's like a 6, if you're thinking about your shapes back from school, right? A hexagon is a 6-sided shape, and then there's also a smooth round core. And typically, the hex core string is tighter. And more taut, and the string travels less when you strike it. It creates, so that's like DR Lowrider. They made that string, I believe. God, I could be spreading misinformation, but I believe the Lowrider is made on a hex core because you can get the action lower because it's traveling less and maybe buzzing less. So that's a lowrider, right?
Interesting, yeah.
But then the Sunbeams are on a round core, and round cores are a little more, like a slightly more spongy, a little more flexible. Like you can even feel them when you pull them out of the pack. They're like really flexible, and they just seem almost like the windings on them are compressed together a little more. They don't feel like a flat wound. I mean, actually, I have them on this bass. I have them on the Vorin Saku right now. They feel they still do the thing, But of all the rounds that I've played, they feel maybe the smoothest, like almost like they have a bit of butter on them or something.
Yeah. Oh, really?
And they're really pliable. So for me, I like them a lot because they feel kind of easy to manipulate. You can play them lightly and they go like with a big amount of sound.
And are they the sunbeams?
Yeah.
Yeah, sunbeams, yeah.
They're also supposed to be great on fretless because I do think that the winding is packed a little tighter. So they're supposed to like grind your fingerboard a little less potentially.
Yeah, like one of the guys that I follow, I mentioned him actually on the trying to find. No, he's not here. Like, it's Larry Lars Danielson. I love his sound, and he actually plays DR strings as well. But I was trying to find there which one it was, and I'm not sure where the actual post is yet. It might be on YouTube somewhere. But somebody actually pops up and says, "Oh, he's using DR strings." Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to do a deep dive into this.
Too, on this bass. On the IMA4, this is a set of Dunlops, but it's their new strings. Have you tried the hybrids yet?
No.
It's basically a nickel outer wrap with a steel inner wrap and then a core. So it's like supposedly, right, you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting the nickel feel, but maybe slightly brighter, more of like a steel string sound. You know, I'm not sure. I will say when I put these strings on this bass, I was like, oh, these feel great. But I don't know that I would have been like, oh, of course there's a steel inner. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that string manufacturers do. There is a lot of marketing, right, in every string manufacturer to get you. You know, they're all using buzzwords and they're all saying what their materials and construction will do to make your tone better. And how much of that is true or not, of course, is super debatable. But I like these strings. I reach for these now. The hybrids on like long scale basses that I want to put rounds on that are like a traditional nickel round. I reach for those more than
over the DRs or over the Super Brights. Over the
Super Brights, yeah,
and over the DRs, which are
The DR for me is like it's a great like a short scale flat, a great round. It's a great short scale round wound string. It's a great fretless round wound string. And actually, I had them on a jazz bass. You might try those, dude. They when they break in, they get really like nice and dead, but they don't lose sustain, and you might really like them.
I think I'm gonna have to jump into it. Dave actually emailed me recently, so I need to. Dave, if you're listening, I owe you an email anyway. But yeah, I'm gonna jump into it and start figuring some of this stuff out. So I certainly need to, because I know it really has a massive effect on your tone, but also the feel of the instrument as well, the tension of the strings, which actually moves us on to flatwounds, right? Because the tension there is just all over the place. There's low tension, there's high tension, it seems so different.
Before we just jump into flats, can I just ask one other thing? Gauge. Do you have any thoughts about gauge? Like round wound gauge, do you prefer 45 to 105? Do you prefer a big tension B string? Do you like, do you care about that stuff?
Yeah. So B's like 130s.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then are you 45, 105, kind of a standard?
Yeah, it's 45 to 105. Actually, I might be telling a lie on the B string. Maybe it's a 125.
Yeah, 125 maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's a 125. I think it's a 125 because I know that Willis uses a 128. And I'm like, oh, does that mean he's more of a man than me? Because he's got a 128. And I've got a 125. Now you know what keeps me up at night. I'm like, is Willis more than a man? Because he's got 3 points extra on his B string. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, it's like a 125 and then 45 to 105. Standard.
Got it. Yeah.
Because you don't use standard, do you?
My favorite, I've just sort of, I've tried to get used to a standard thing. If I had my druthers always, like if I could make, hey, string manufacturer, will you make me this custom set and send me 1 million of them and then I will talk about it all the time? Can you do that?
Silent pitch there going on. Yeah.
My favorite thing in the world is a lighter bottom and heavier top. So I love basically like a
Same.
45, 65, and then an 80, 100. I don't like a heavy E string. I think that like lighter gauge E strings sound better to me. Seems like they live a little longer. They sustain a little longer.
So you want light on the top?
No,
heavy. Heavy on the top.
Maybe
So
I misspoke. Yes,
45, 65.
and then 80, 100.
Oh, so light.
That's
on
my
the
favorite
bottom
thing.
end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I want to have a little bit more like fight on top. Like I like the feeling of a thicker D and G string. I also think it's
me too,
maybe maybe helps low end out up there. But then as I come down, I don't want a giant meaty cable on the on the E string. Actually, what I'd love to experiment with is even some in-betweens. Like I'd love to do 95, 82, 65, 47. That's what I want.
Yeah. So a bit beefier on the D and the G string.
Yes. And then even later, 95 E string,
Yeah.
And then progressively heavier I remember talking to, I think, Eric Coco at Alinto, and he was like, what? he was like, really? And I'm like, yeah, man, that's what so I could just be alone, but that's just whenever I play a bass, I always feel like I want the bottom strings to be a little bit more flexible and like, I don't know, pliant or something. And then I want the upper strings to be a little thicker and less forgiving because I'm not bending and I'm not, I don't know. The sound of the instrument feels more consistent to me when like I don't have huge gauge bottom strings and tiny top strings,
Yeah. It's so interesting. We should do, man, like, and obviously not, we should just like mark down a week in the calendar and then just privately on our own just do a freaking deep dive into all of these different strings. We'll just make a promise to each other that we're going to go hard, right, for a week, and then we should do a podcast on it and talk about our findings. That would be great.
Amazing. If you want that, guys, let us know. Like if you would be like, if that's the rabbit hole that you want us to go down, we will do that for you. Dear podcast listener, we will do that for you.
Yeah. Oh, and we'll hate it. Yeah, we'll do like nothing in it for us at all, right? We're just throwing ourselves on the sword for you guys. Yes, absolutely for science. Yeah.
Can we talk flats? Can we talk flats for a bit?
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Go for it.
Because flats are, you guys, if you want to dive into flats, just know there's a couple things you can do. Go buy a set of flats. Who cares what they are? Put them on your bass, commit to them for the rest of your life, and don't think about it ever again. And that probably is what you should do. Just go buy some flats. Like, guess what? James Jamerson put one set of flats. Maybe it came with him. I'm not sure. But he got a set of labella flats on his bass. He's like, what's the most, upright string? I'm sure Eric Coco knows the story there, right?
Yeah.
And he put them on. And he didn't try other brands. He wasn't A-Bing flats. And guess what? He committed to that, set the bass up for that. They broke in. He loved them so much that when a G string broke, he asked Labella if they could weld it back together so that he wouldn't have to change his strings. Right?
That's wild.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So that's one approach. Get a set of flats. Here's the thing. You're going to put them on and you're going to say, holy shit, these are bright. These are weird. They're bright. They don't sound old school. And that's correct because it takes a long time for them to break in. It's so strange. Maybe even months, maybe even 20 gigs, maybe even a year. I will say I
actually like new flats as well. Like
I do too.
I do. Yeah, dude.
I do too.
I freaking like them.
They're
I like
cool
it.
sounding.
They're not obviously they're not the same as sort of like you kind of like, boom, boom, boom. They're not the traditional flat, but I think they sound freaking awesome.
They sound more like a roundwound than you're expecting them to, right?
Yes.
Like right out of the package, you're like, oh shit. I could play everything on this. They're smooth to the touch. You feel like you can slide. There's no finger noise. Ooh, smooth to the touch.
Yeah, they are. They're great. They're really great. And then as they age.
Yes.
Well, for me, I will say, so this is just something I guess it's interesting to put out there, right? That I started playing flats because I'd heard they were cool. And all of the cool players were saying they were cool. So I myself, I was like, yo, flats is where it's at. Flats, blah, blah, blah. And then I put them on my bass and I was like, oh, they're not as flat sounding as I thought they were going to be. And then as they did start getting deader, they were just, it just didn't sound like me. I was like, ugh.
Right.
These sound a bit shit. You know, honestly, Because I was stepping into a world that I wasn't used to it. I was like, where's all my tone gone? Like, these things are just sort of like really, really thin response in terms of on the frequency range. I was like, where's all the dynamic gone? Like, it's all gone. And I just didn't get it yet. It's like, and the only thing that really I can liken it to, I guess, in the moment is my favourite scale of all time that I have the most fun with is the melodic minor. I love it. And it's really part of my sound when I play, especially from an improvisational standpoint, right? But the first time that somebody taught me a melodic minor scale, I was like, this is the weirdest, crappiest sounding. Like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Right, yes. You didn't know how it fit.
I just didn't know how it fit, how to use it, what to do with it. Therefore, my instant kind of like emotional reaction was, ugh, this just doesn't feel great. And I had the same thing with flats. I was like, ugh, this doesn't feel great. Everybody said they were cool. This is not cool. Right. This is crap. Like, this was the Emperor's New Clothes. And I think that there is an element of that because all of the cool players at the time were like all talking about flats. Yeah, they are, and they are great. But I'll tell you what, they're not great for everything. They're not great for everything.
Totally true.
Exactly. So I was one of those players that were just, I'd heard people say they were great, people that I really admired, and then when I put them on my bass, I was like, oh, and I was like that because they're not great for everything. You know,
that's so true.
You're not going to pop them on your bass and sound like Marcus Miller. Jesus.
No,
right?
Very true.
It's like, it's a completely different tonal aesthetic, and you've got to learn it. That would be and I love them. Just to put it out there now, I freaking love them. Yes. But it's something you got to learn.
Yeah. And I think a flat that is old and broken in, it just sounds like nostalgic bass. Yeah. And when Scott, like you said, like a narrow band of tone, it sort of sits only in the bottom and mid range. There's zero top, there's zero sizzle. So that thing of if you dig in hard and expect it to go, expect it to like snap, like that wonderful thing of when you dig into fresh roundwound strings on a jazz bass and it's like, it just feels like it's slapping you in the face. Flats just don't do that. They kind of thunk or like bark. They're like, yeah. And it's weird. And to me, an old flatwound sounds best when played light. Like an old flatwound sounds the best when the action is kind of high or like medium to high. Yeah. You play kind of light, and then they just fill the track or the room with bottom and with mid-range.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Like, just to your, I was playing them. I didn't put them on a P bass. I just put them on a normal bass of mine, and so there's incongruence there straight away because and I'm not saying that you can't use flats on different basses. You can use them on all basses, but just
of course,
the thing that I was expecting didn't happen. I was like, oh, this is so weird. Like, what is this? And what you said about playing it lightly there, like a great somebody to check out actually who plays great is Sean Hurley, and he plays with a feather light touch on his right hand. Yeah. And the reason I've talked to him about the reason he does this is that imagine if you really kind of sort of like hit a string quite hard and it's a round wound, you're going to get like a big sort of like wah at the front end of the note, right, and then it's going to die down. And actually Sean wants it to be much more consistent along the life cycle of that note. So instead of giving it a bang at the front end of the note and it just disappearing, he wants to really use his featherlight touch. That's right. That featherlight touch, because he's just going to boom, and then it's going to sustain, giving him the ability to then turn the amp up. The perception of it is that it's a fatter sound. It's a fatter sound. Yes. Now, interestingly, you can do this on on roundwounds as well. Gary Willis has talked about this extensively, that he plays with a super light touch because the perception of the note is fatter. So, and also Sean Hurley goes really nerdy about it in terms of when you watch where he plays exactly at the point where Jameson played as well, because he's experimented with a lot, and he said just in front of the neck pickup is where it sounds best for that particular fat tone that he's going for. And it's exactly, and like Jameson had the plate over the strings, so his finger plucked just in front of the plate. So it's like, I absolutely love this stuff. And for me, it was like an expectation thing. You know, I wasn't expecting what it sounded like, but also my technique wasn't dialed in, dude. I just sort of like picked it up and played it how I played a bass. And it was like, ooh, like, and I play quite hard. And knowing that now, when I play up, pick a bass up with flats on, I do reduce that down, because you get this weird bar, it's just weird when you dig in too much. So he just grabbed his bass actually to show you guys. If you're watching the video over on YouTube, you'll see it.
Yeah, so, you know, Jamerson had the cover on a P bass like this, right? So here's a P bass, here's the pickup cover, and Jamerson would rest 3 fingers on the cover and play with 1 finger right in front of the cover. Yeah. So it's actually a really comfortable hand shape. You put your thumb on the edge of the cover, these 3 fingers on the cover, and then you just play with 1 finger. And that is, it's such an amazing, beautiful, big sound. You know, I will say, Scott, like somebody who is one of one, we talked about this notion of one of one, you know, in a past episode, and who plays flats on a P bass that does not sound like any of these guys, is Steve Harris.
Steve Harris,
And Steve has this like more kind of clanky rock and roll sound, and he plays roto sound flatwounds on his bass, and he changes them. Yeah. And because he wants a string to be bright, but he does, you know, so he's not interested in like, you know, leaving them on and letting them, you know, marinate in the oils and and like 10 years down the road they're going to be perfect and all that stuff. He wants them to be bright. And there's something too, I agree, man, when I always have flatwounds on my 68 jazz bass. And when I change them, I am like, oh, this is good. I wonder if every 4 months or every 6 months, maybe I should just change them and not be on that bass into like, oh, I'm going to keep them on forever, because there is something about the feel and the smoothness, but then you still have more of that dynamic range in the high end before they die.
Yeah, exactly. Before they die and do that thing, like it's maybe there's a midpoint where you can exist and get everything. I will say that one of my it's so interesting. I know I've said that phrase about 10. It's the realization as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, it's so interesting. Like if you take somebody like, I don't know, Michael League, right? So he plays the P bass, and when I listen to him play, he sounds like you'd expect on that bass, right? It sounds like a flatwound on a P bass.
Yes, I agree. He said when he records his bass, like Hurley, you know, he said he wants his notes to appear in the DAW, like in Pro Tools or Logic. Yeah. He wants them to look like sausages and not traffic cones. Remember
exactly that? Yeah.
Right? Because like sausages, not witch hats, right? You know, if you think about a witch hat or a traffic cone, right? The big peak at the top and then this taper. No, he wants to play really softly so that the whole note, the attack volume and dynamic is actually very similar to its tail. And you could really see that. You can see your tendency in a DAW if you check it out. It's really, really interesting actually to see. Now I'm saying it too, Scott. It's really so interesting.
Right? But check this out. Okay, so this is somebody. It's not a P bass, but he's playing through a P bass pickup with flats on, and this does not sound anything like what you'd imagine in your mind, or like Michael League, for instance. Nothing like that.
I'm ready. Is that Marin?
Yeah.
Who is that? Dude.
Even though our sound is so contained in our hands.
Jesus Christ, he's so good.
He's so good.
We love Jonathan Marin. Jonathan Marin, we love you. He plays hard too, Scott.
Exactly. That's why he was actually sort of like top of mind when we were thinking about this. He plays hard as heck.
He does.
And you can hear it in it. Like, that's the sound. Yeah.
Yes.
Like it's.
Is that a P or is that the Yamaha?
Dude, that's the Yamaha.
It's going to be the most
Check it.
fun for the listener.
Here it comes.
Yeah. I mean, do you just need to get your BB set up beautifully and find the strings and maybe
Man, I wish.
you know?
I can't because it does something to my focal dystonia. I have no idea why. Have I told you that before?
Really? No.
That freaking bass, for whatever reason why, I've not told you. It's like kryptonite.
No.
It's kryptonite to my focal dystonia.
You're kidding.
No, it completely screws me over. Yeah. I've got no idea why. No idea why.
Wow.
Yeah, super weird. I don't even need to play any notes on it. Like, just it's kryptonite.
Oh, just the feel
It's
of it.
just the
I was
feel
just
of
saying.
it. Yeah, it's weird.
I was just saying. I wonder if you put flats on it. Like maybe it'd change it.
Maybe,
but I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't.
But the tone is like when I listen to that. Like I've listened to that clip an obscene amount of times. And I'm like,
wow.
That might be my favourite tone on any bass I've ever heard. It's just crushing. It's so good. It's obscene. It's obscene, honestly.
Jonathan, if you're listening now, I know what he would say. He would say, "Wow, I owe you a box of pastries."
Oh, he's so sweet, isn't he? He's goddamn so sweet.
He's like, how many boxes of pastries do I owe you now, Scott? He'd say it all like under, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh, dude, he's incredible. That is a great sound. And when I interviewed him for Bass Space 23, he demonstrated like the Maxwell bass line and a few other things. And I realized just hearing him play on his own, even more than when I've watched the courses, for some reason, when I was just one-on-one with him and he was just playing over over a Zoom call or Riverside, whatever, he plays hard.
Yeah.
Like really, really plays dynamic. I mean, it's not that he can't play soft, obviously. When he digs, he really digs in hard. He's getting this big dig in sound out of the instrument. Like when he accents, he really accents.
Yeah.
Way more than I do. So much more than I do.
Yeah, he's really hard, and also he's loud in the room as well. It was so funny. We were in the studio in Brooklyn, and we would, and I can't remember what we said, but I was like. It was something like, I'm going to like paraphrase it, but I was like, wow, I was like, you play really hard. And he was like, oh yeah, man. He was like I'm a quiet person, but he was like, when it comes to bass, I play hard and I turn up loud. And it was, and he was like there with his 4x10 and he was like digging in and it was loud. It was like no apologies, and it was awesome. It was awesome. That was the second time we were in the studio together. The first time was at another studio also in Brooklyn. And out of all of we had some incredible bass players in, like, the cream of the crop, all of these amazing players. And he stood out to me as very individual, a one of one. Again, he was a one of one. He was not shredding, but had amazing chops. He was just, I can't really put my finger on it, but he was definitely a one of one. He had his Yamaha BB and like from a tonal standpoint, very individual as well. It was just, I think that sometimes when we talk about one of one, being a one of one, it's all of the little things that add up to make that happen as well. Like you can look at guys like Steve Swallow, right? It's kind of obvious. Oh yeah, he's playing a 5-string acoustic bass with a high C with a plectrum. Of course, he's a one of one.
Right.
Look at like Carlos Benavent, the flamenco player that I told you about, the electric player. Again, plectrum, E to C, like flamenco, one of one. Victor Wooten, right? Come on, the guy's so friggin' extreme, one of one. But when you look at Jonathan Marin, it's like, well, he is a one of one. When I watch him play, there's not many people doing what he does, and it's maybe all of the little things. It's less obvious.
Yes,
I would.
It's less pyrotechnic. He's not Les Claypool.
Thing about you, Mr. Allison.
Oh, Interesting.
I bet there are some people that are thinking that exact thing right now, actually. Yeah, and I think I think it's all of the different, you play you've got, what's your main bass? Really, it's a jazz bass. It's got flat wounds on it. You've got the whole effects thing going on it. You play very lightly. You've like own kind of like approach to vocabulary. I think that you are one of one, my friend.
Oh man, that is very sweet.
I do.
I'm blushing over
and
here.
Almost 50,000 people over on Instagram also think that as well.
Yeah, I'm getting close, man. I'm just a few every day, just slowly getting there, man. I'm gonna be pretty excited when I get to 50.
I think that's what also makes you stand out on Instagram, because you're a one of one. You do that one thing, and I think that And we slid from strings into something else, but all that to say that I think that everybody should put time and effort into experimentation with strings, and also definitely try out flatwounds. It's great fun. There's fun to be had over in that world.
I mean, I know we got to wind it down, but we didn't, people are going to be like, hold on, what about pressure wound? Hold on, what about nylon tapes?
Yeah.
Hold on, what about, and what about gold alloy strings? And what about, there are so
strings,
many.
Elixirs,
oh my God, of course, elixirs, yes. Yeah. Ooh, do you say elixir?
I called elixir. Is it elixir? I think it is elixir.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
I like elixir.
I like elixir as well. Let's call him that from now on.
Yeah, please.
A friend of mine was, I don't know if anybody listens to this that might be in contact with the guy from Elixir, but a friend of mine was on holiday, and he went to the Grand Canyon, and he randomly met, I think, or at least the story he told me, he was like, oh yeah, I randomly, I was at the Grand Canyon on holiday and randomly met the guy who runs the company, who either founded it or...
Really?
Yeah, and he said that he was on holiday as well, and they just randomly struck up this conversation. He was like, I'm a guitar player, and the guy was like, I make strings. Have you heard of Elixir strings? And my friend was like,
amazing.
Yes, I have heard of them. Anyway, I digress.
Of course.
So should we...
They were the huge thing for so long.
Should we do a different like a future episode on, should we go, like tapes and do
we need strings part 2? Maybe we do.
Maybe.
Let us know, guys. I mean, because I've got tapes on some stuff. I've got tapes on 2 basses. I have tapes on an old Coronado hollow body.
I've got tapes, yeah.
And I have tapes on a Yamaha BB 3000, actually.
Dude. Tapes are awesome.
And
they're awesome. They
are awesome.
Yeah, they should be
and they're
more.
different than flats, and it's Boom Bishop, and
they're somewhere in between, and half rounds.
I know it's a different vibe. And pressure wounds. I played a set of GHS pressure wounds on a P bass for a while. We could also do like the oddball string episode, right? Obviously there's rounds and flats. You got it. Now, I hope you have a little bit of thought about how to go about choosing a string set. I feel like we didn't even really talk that much about flats, though, dude.
I know, we need to.
I don't think we did.
Guys, tell us, give us a shout out on. I'll tell you what. Actually, the guys in the YouTube audience are awesome. They leave so many freaking awesome comments. Please know that we read all of those comments. Like I go every single week. I go to YouTube, I read all of them comments, and every single week I'm like, wow, I cannot believe how engaged you guys are, and how sweet so cool. you are, and all of the amazing comments that you leave. It is very different, actually. On our regular YouTube channel, maybe it's just because it's bigger, you get a whole mix of individuals. Like, you get great comments, you get people shooting you down, the whole thing. But like the podcast listeners over on YouTube are just freaking awesome. So yeah, cool. Thank you so much.
I know.
Guys. We really don't take you for granted. And thanks so much for leaving all of those great comments. Please let us know in the comments. Do you want another episode on strings? We would love to make it for you. I think we need to.
I feel like we didn't even because I was like, oh yeah, I need to talk about, the different gauges and styles of flats on different scales. I think is actually it's a big deal for me. I play different flats on a short scale than I do on a long scale. And I think we need to maybe do another episode that's like flats and then the others. Flats and others, right? It's like flats and then it's tapes, halves, pressures, and coated.
Dudes, let us know in the comments. We will do it for you. Right, guys, take it easy. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Take care, everybody.